Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is the show where you get to call in and ask any and all of your questions about everything related to trans rights. I am your solo host today. Our good friend Katy Montgomerie, who was supposed to be joining me and who filled out the availability sheet with a nice green Y, forgot and made herself busy. So I am running solo. I did shoot out a few messages to try to last minute grab a guest, but it just did not work. So that's all right. I will be running solo and just kind of fucking taking the whole thing by myself today. So it's a little frustrating when I have to also produce because normally there's someone here to fill in the dead air while I'm doing something with my focus, but I will do my best. No promises that it's going to be graceful or good or that the transitions are going to look good because it's rough. All right. I fixed things up in literally 3 minutes. So we'll see how this goes. But just kind of a week in recap for me personally. We had 2 snakes lay clutches of eggs this morning, which we weren't expecting this late in the season. We knew they were pretty far along in development, but we thought it might be a little bit closer to the end of the year that they would lay. Matt went in to check them today, and one had laid, and we were like, oh my God. And then as we were finishing up taking care of that, we realized that another one had laid. So that was crazy. Very exciting stuff. Those are going to be our dreamsicle clutches. So those are the pretty orange and white snakes. Very excited about that. Don't have any personal trans related news to talk about, but we're going to get into the polls and talk about some current events. So let's see. I've already tested this and I already know these transitions are going to be terrible because they're working on a virtual snapshot, which is like a copy of the usual window that will have Katie's window in there. And so it's going to do this thing where she her window glitches over me. You know what? You guys are getting an inside look. That's what this is. All right. A little fun moment here. All right. So see that? If I had 5 more minutes, I totally could have fixed that. Anyway, last week's poll was, should trans people correct strangers who publicly misgender them? And I am shocked right now, actually, looking at how many people said no. I could see maybe an argument being something around safety as a reason for saying no. Only because, there's always, as a trans person, when you are kind of asserting your humanity to someone who's denying it to you, there's always a risk that they won't take kindly to that. And I definitely appreciate people wanting to feel out the situation, but this was related to the viral video from last week from, I think her name was Latino. I already forgot. It blew up of her getting misgendered a couple of times in restaurants and correcting the staff. And I thought, we talked about it last week. The interactions were relatively positive, but clearly she felt hurt and it was clearly uncomfortable, but I thought everyone was relatively mature considering the circumstances. And there was a lot of people saying that she shouldn't be correcting these people and that, she's not putting work in or just the things along those lines, basically saying that because, they arbitrarily have some feelings about her as a trans person that she doesn't get to correct people on the pronouns, when I think that's the way to do it, right? If people make the wrong assumption, that's fine. But then if you correct them, and then that's how you navigate that situation. That just seems like the ideal to me. But anyway, it was very viral. We got 63% saying yes and 37% saying no. Okay, some people are saying they don't like the question. They feels like it implies an obligation to correct someone. Definitely, I don't think as anyone is obligated to. I can kind of see how you'd get that out of this wording, but that's definitely not. Okay, yeah, that seems to be the majority of the responses, is that the language, should trans people correct strangers, was interpreted as sort of an obligation, an obligatory thing, which is not how it was intended, but I actually do see how that wording got interpreted that way. Anyway, we're moving on to this week's poll, which is Da, 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 da. Is it likely that Republicans will keep losing elections if they maintain an anti-trans agenda? Now, we love our loaded polls here on Transatlantic. So this poll was basically related to, if you didn't see, there were a bunch of elections just, I think it was 2 days ago in the U.S., and there were a bunch of wins for Democrats, and namely the Kentucky governor, Andy Beshear, won, and his opponent had been running a heavy course. I think there was like $2 million funded from some PAC organization of just really pushing the anti-trans message. A lot of Riley Gaines interviews, trans athletes in sports and this sort of thing. And they lost despite all that funding and or all that money put into those specific campaigns. And this is kind of a trend that we had been seeing. There were also a bunch of school board seats that were being contested largely over anti-LGBTQ sort of sentiments that were lost. And this is kind of a trend we saw last year when Herschel Walker lost his runoff election after, on the in-between period, was really pushing those same Riley Gaines interviews, talking about trans athletes and, the trying to fearmonger that the left is going to destroy women's sports or women's rights or something along those lines. And it doesn't seem to be working for them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that people don't have strong anti-trans sentiment, but it does seem to mean that it's not a winning political strategy at this point in time. So it's curious to see. I'm wondering how this is going to impact future elections, if at all, if they're going to think we just didn't go hard enough, or maybe, they'll back off it a little bit. I really liked, actually, there was an interview with Andy Beshear after the election talking about it. And I think he did something that I thought was more impactful than a lot of activism I've ever done. He basically said, I didn't want to get wrapped up in whatever the Washington issue of the day is. And I kind of like this notion of treating the anti-trans sentiment from conservatives as this popular hot button issue that's just silly and kind of should be thrown out. And that he was focusing on, roads and education and the things that actually mattered to his constituents. And I thought that was a really powerful message of really framing the culture war, what conservatives are advocating for, this notion of how that we're losing our culture and Western culture is dying and all these sorts of things, and treating that like the ridiculous thing that it is, and focusing on the things that actually matter to voters, which is inflation and education and the things that actually impact them every day. So yeah, that was I think some really good news. And there was, I saw Ari Drennan, trans activist, post a clip from Matt Walsh as well, where after a week of losses, he basically said, I'm not gonna talk about the losses that we went through last night, but what I am gonna talk about is the fact that there's a conspiracy that Michelle Obama is a man, and I'm not gonna talk about that I think Michelle Obama is a man, but here's some other people who've said that, including Kyle Rittenhouse, and you should go check that out. And I think it's interesting to watch them flounder as they realize that their ideas are not as popular as maybe they thought they were. So yeah, those are our polls for this week. So you should go definitely vote on those on our community tab right here on the line. And we will get rolling with some calls. Let's see who we've got. I haven't put anyone into the Chirons yet, so we're just going to pull people in as they come in. Hopefully I don't regret that because I don't have time to read the messages. All right. We are talking to... Oop, I thought I hit the button. We are talking to Rebecca in Ireland. Pronouns are she, her. Rebecca, you are live on the line. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well. What do you want to talk about today?
So I work as a massage therapist at a spa.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm calling to ask you if anything I'm doing there in terms of respecting people of all genders is wrong, or if there's anything I can do better.
Well, I would definitely not say respecting people of all genders is wrong. I think
No, huh?
that that
Sorry,
motivation.
I want to give you the two criteria,
Sure.
the two things where I need like your advice on.
Okay. Go for it.
Okay, so the system at work is like this. There are two spa areas, and they're both connected to the changing room. So one is for ladies only, and the other one is for men and or couples. So
Okay.
mixed. They call them men or mixed side or the ladies side. That's what they call them. And the system is that we're given a consultation form where there's the name of the client, and people are asked for their gender. So based on that information, the name of the client, and when they list the gender, we go looking for the person. If they don't list the gender, we have to guess the gender from the name to go and look for the person. That's one. And the second one is we have two sets of disposable underwear we give the client. One is like shorts, like short shorts, and the other one is a bit like a tongue, but it has a bit of a strip on the back. And I've been told that we give the shorts to the men and the tongues to the women. And I've been giving men the tongues for 2 months. I've been working there for the most of 3 months. I've been giving men tongues because I didn't know we had the briefs. So
Right.
my question is about how do I conduct myself when searching for the client in the men's or women's section, if there's something I can do differently, and when someone comes into my treatment room, to give them the right underwear that they might want, or if there's anything you can tell me so I can do things properly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, this is not an area where I have a lot of any expertise. So take that with a grain of salt. But I think really when it comes to things like the facilities people use as far as changing
Mm-hmm.
rooms and clothes, I think uh, perhaps just offering them more of a choice and not really making assumptions based on their name or anything like that. I think it's fair to just say, these are the two clothing options we have. Whatever one you want, take it. Because I mean, I don't I I don't particularly know, who or why. But a cis man, I guess, could maybe want the thong, and if they're not hurting anyone, I don't really see a reason for that. I To avoid that. So I think it'd be perfectly acceptable to just kind of ask people like, here are your two options. Take whichever one you're more comfortable with. And as far as the facilities go, I think it's fine to have maybe like a joint facility and a women's facility. Just let people decide which one is more comfortable for them. Um, uh, so I mean, those are the easiest ones. I think that everyone's gonna jump to right away. I think as far as anything uh, past that, probably
Mm-hmm.
communicating about the client's body and any areas that they might not be comfortable being touched on. But I've had massages before, and that's kind of something that usually happens anyway. Usually there's like, areas you want me to avoid or something. There's a conversation like that in there. So I'm not sure that there's much
Yeah.
adjustments you really have to do. Um, just kind of offering your clients choices instead of, making assumptions. Not that I'm saying you are making assumptions, but it makes sense that companies create policies that rely on assumptions, but just kind of saying, well, we don't need to do that. We can just ask people what they want. And then everyone's happier, including some cis people. And yeah, no assumptions are needed. Is that helpful?
Yeah, so I'll just give people just two sets of underwear and say you can choose to use one of these and just leave them to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that,
Okay.
that's really where it lands for me.
Okay. I think that's all. I don't need to take up any more of your time, Arden. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Good luck and let us know how that goes.
Okay, stay well. Thank you.
You as well. Bye. All right. So that was easy, pretty straightforward, I think. Uh, Choices are always good. So I do have a little bit of a job to do here. Oh, Where is the right page? You know what? I'm just going to reload this all together. While Transatlantic is far and away the best show on the line, if you really have nothing else to do, there are some other shows you should check out. For example, oh, wow, sorry. I'm totally. Oh, we don't really have much on the schedule for next week. That's why. This Sunday, this is the most interesting thing. We're going to have a Shannon Q and Matt Dillahunty episode of the Sunday show. So if this Sunday at 2 p.m. Central Time, you are interested in hearing some theist battles, or perhaps Shannon Q and Matt debating on, Matt will have to tell you in the chat, they were debating on some topic during the hang up that Shannon Q was jumping in on, ichtheism, I think. So maybe they'll do their own little debate on that. On Monday on Skep Talk, we've got Erica Gibbon hosting. Tuesday, when Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock. Next Wednesday's hang up is going to be Matt Dillahunty and J Mike at 6 p.m. Central Time. And then next Thursday, I will be back here. Who knows who will be my host at this point? I have a few people I've been meaning to ask to come back on. I would like to see maybe Nominal Naomi back again. She does really great, and she's usually quite flexible with her time. Of course, we love having Josie on. So we'll see who we can get. Also, if you would like to support the network, the best way to do that is to subscribe to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/calltheline. If you want to make LineCon happen, if you want to see these debate shows get off the ground, that is the best way to fund us to make all those things happen. We are expanding the networks constantly, and we have so many exciting things coming, but we need your support to make them possible. So check those things out. Let me also pull the callers off hold music so they can hear the show in the meantime. Okay, so coming up next, we've got Larry in Indiana. Pronouns are he, him. Larry, you're live on the line. What's going on?
Hi. Thanks so much for taking my phone call. So I was hoping to get some help because so I have a sibling who's transgender, and over the last couple of years, we came from a very fundamentalist Christian culture. We were a part of the independent fundamental Baptist movement. It was very culty, and so over the last couple of years, I've deconstructed it completely, and so I've deconstructed a lot of baggage that came along with that, including transphobia and homophobia, but I have a sibling who is very much transgender, and it was something that took time, but it came to a point where I was able to come to terms with reality and accept and respect them as they wish to be. But my problem is that my internal thoughts and my monologue, it always refers back to my little sister, and it's hard to, I guess, refer to them internally as the man they wish to be, viewed as. And I can do that in every way except for in my, it's hard to explain. I'm so sorry.
No, I understand.
But it's hard. You see what I'm saying? I wish to be as respectful as I possibly can be, but it's hard to refer back to all those memories as time with my little brother when it's always my little sister in my mind. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. So I hear you using a lot of they, them pronouns, so then talking about referring to them as your brother. So is your sibling non-binary, or are they a trans man?
No. Trans man. Sorry. I'm
okay.
It's because of this issue I'm having with pulling from my memories of my little sister and then referring to him as he wishes.
Yeah.
It just causes this instinctual conflict whenever the words roll off my tongue, or mostly it's not even when I'm talking to anybody. It's just whenever I'm internally reflecting on, him, that it's a her, because that's where all my memories are, is with her instead of with him. And so it's not any sort of like disrespectful thing. It's just the way my history is. It's so hard to explain. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I get where you're coming from. I mean, I've been out as trans for a very long time. My parents have, for the most part, adjusted. It's pretty rare that I get misgendered, but you get a couple of drinks in my mom, and every now and then a little he will slip out. And it'll
Right.
usually be something innocuous, just like a really offhanded comment. She doesn't even realize she said it because it was so not even in her mind. I think there is a difficulty when it comes to family and people who knew someone before transition, where
Right.
it's not quite the same as meeting someone and knowing they're trans and always having them exist in your brain as that gender. There's the issue with the memories and things like that. I think part of it is to, first of all, not be too hard on yourself, because I think while we can definitely do things that can help influence our emotions and our thoughts down the road, as far as the immediate results of your brain processing things, that's not exactly an active choice you're making. Those are just kind of how your brain is working. So cutting yourself a break in that, like you're saying, you're not being malicious. This is just kind of what's going on in your brain. I think really it is probably going to be, unfortunately, a time thing, and spending more time with your sibling and kind of seeing him maybe around his friends and in his environments to kind of let those new memories really take root in your brain rather than always referring back to the old memories. But yeah, I mean, it's I've also recommended to people before kind of this weird, like, sort of thing that I almost consider like a practice, where when you're talking to someone else about your sibling, try to put yourself in the situation of that a lot, because I think it's a lot easier to catch yourself and start coding them as male when you're referring to them in sort of that third person. He wants to do this, and he asked us to go to this place. Oh yeah, I was with my brother and he wanted us to do this. That kind of stuff is a little bit easier because you're giving yourself runway and preparing for that conversation to code him as male the whole time. And when you're using those neurons over and over again, that's going to create that pattern in your brain where it's going to be easier to reach for those pronouns than the she pronouns over time. But as for right now, I think it's just that, you've lived your whole life referring to him one way, and your brain is used to pairing this person in your mind with this set of pronouns, and that's just kind of where you're at. But I think if you're pro-trans and you are like logically accepting and like understanding of him and where he's at, I think you're going to get there. I think it's really just a matter of time and cutting yourself a break. How long has your brother been out?
For the past probably 8 years, and so that's kind of where my difficulty is, because around that time I was completely saturated in the cult I was involved in, and so we grew apart as brother and sister because there was an incredible difference between our worldviews. And so he went off to live his life, and then I stayed, in this horrible echo chamber. And so to that point, I had 20 years of having a little sister, and then I wasn't estranged, but as close as you can have, as close as you can be to being estranged, up until literally maybe 3 years ago. And so all of my memories are of then, and at the time, and of course I know that, there's more to it than this, but he was very much a feminine young lady. And so it's just, I completely accept and give as much respect as I can. It's just, I'm pulling from decades of this. And so it's internally instinctive to say, well, yeah, when me and my little sister was doing this, or yeah, whenever she did this, and it's not malicious. It's just what I have to reference. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I think so. With that kind of context information, I'll admit it, I can imagine there is a little bit of a strain if he's been out for 8 years and y'all are just kind of coming back to each other in the past 3 years. I think so. So for me, there was kind of a sentiment of, for the next 3 or 4 years, I would be comfortable with understanding if we're not around each other all the time, mistakes going on. But after that, I'm kind of like, okay, I need to see more solid effort. Yeah. I can imagine this is a common sentiment from trans people that, sometimes we're out for a long time and we're comfortable with our transness for a long time, but other people are just kind of a little bit behind on the getting used to it part. And so there can be a little bit of a disparity there that can drive some discomfort. I will say, definitely, I think probably if you're really seeking this relationship to be stronger and more cemented, probably some solid effort on like, I mean, like calling into a show like this is good, like understanding trans issues and trans people and trans experiences, but understanding him as an individual is going to be really important, because I think really what you need to do is start learning to kind of replace some of those memories with new memories of him now as he is. And eventually it'll get easier to go back and recode some of those old memories. Actually, just recently, I think it wasn't the last time we went home, it was the time before that. So it was like a year and a half ago or something. My stepdad started referring to when I was younger in a way where he was referring to me as a girl. And that was really cool to see, because we had never had the conversation about that's something you should do. He just kind of figured it out, or maybe he heard it on the show. I don't know. I don't know how much he and my mom watch. So yeah, I think there is totally room for you to be forgiving of yourself and to understand that where you're coming from. But I also do think it's incumbent upon you to, if you want to have a close relationship with your brother, to start working a little bit harder on replacing those memories and working those new neural pathways and really trying to cement your idea of him as he is and not how you remember him. Or because also it's worth mentioning that how you remember him was probably a performance on his part and not authentically who he was, right? I mean, if you all were coming from a cult environment and you're saying he was a very like feminine presenting at the time, like it's probably the case that he was very much putting on a performance and you didn't have the opportunity to really get to know authentically who he is. So I think it's maybe going to be a big part of replacing those memories is really getting to know who he actually is as a person and not who you remember him to be.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a lot of relearning that I've experienced over the last couple of years, coming out of, it was actually stumbling upon these call-in shows that helped me along this, path. And so I can get that. I've had to relearn basically everything for the last couple of years. And so it's been a learning curve in every other area. So I expect it to be this way in this area as well. So
sure. Yeah,
I really, really appreciate it. I stumbled upon the content Matt put out and Forrest, and they're heroes to me. And so you guys are just really helping people. I hope you know that. It's really refreshing to hear what you guys put out.
Well, it's very kind of you to say. I'll tell you, Matt's not all that exciting once you actually know him. But yeah, well, thank you for calling, Larry. Hopefully that was helpful. If you kind of maybe, I think it would be worth going and having a conversation with your brother and kind of expressing this sentiment and kind of seeing how he wants to move forward together. But if you do that, I would love for you to call back and tell us how that went and what kind of advice he gave you, because that could be really impactful for some other people here who may be in a similar position to you that want to hear how a conversation like that went.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Sure thing. Have a nice day. Larry, bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
I think I said have a nice time, which is it's kind of like when you go to the movies and somebody says enjoy the movie and you say you too. Shit, not the right thing to say. All right, we're just gonna keep taking calls in the order they come in because I don't really have time to thoroughly evaluate the stuff on the call screener notes. So we're gonna jump right in with Alan in Washington. Pronouns are he, him. Alan, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Hi.
Hey.
Sorry, I'm not great at articulating when I feel like I'm under pressure here.
Okay.
I am in a situation where I'm not in a great relationship with my doctors or my family. My parents are the only ones who can understand, but they're at a point where they need assisted living, and my health has deteriorated to a point to where I can barely take care of myself, and I'm getting more and more scared by the day that I'm not going to have the chance to do any kind of meaningful transitioning.
Interesting. I mean, first of all, I'm sorry that it sounds like you are in a position that is very difficult right now. And so, I'm definitely sorry that you're feeling distressed. And I want to note, though, you talked about, not feeling like you can meaningfully transition. And I think that is kind of an interesting way to phrase it.
Well, what I phrased it to the sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I phrased it to the call screener as medically transitioning. It's just that I'm also afraid that with the way the rest of my family kind of behaves, that even social transition is not really going to be a viable option.
Okay. So so this is a difficult position. I'm gonna kind of go through why. I want to be able to, offer you my thoughts and my best advice for how to navigate a situation like this. And I appreciate that also you are maybe wanting to preserve some of your privacy and maybe not necessarily divulge, the full gory details of your situation. And that makes sense. Especially considering, I'm not a licensed professional or anything like that. I will say, though, I don't have many details to go off of with kind of what you've said so far. So, like, you said your parents were kind of understanding, but that you have a difficult relationship with your doctors, as well as is it like your extended family that you're struggling with?
Yeah. Like I said, my parents are at the point where they need assisted living, and they're starting to have memory issues as well. And then when it comes to my siblings and everyone else that's close to the immediate family, their approach to me has not been particularly helpful. They are the type of people who come at you from the point of view that you learn to swim by us throwing you in the deep end of the pool. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to my doctors, I have a constellation of issues, and because the medical system I use is comprised of more of a team who kind of sparsely intercommunicate with each other, keeping things consistent is kind of difficult. And
sure.
On a few occasions, I've just been met with doctors that just don't really believe that I'm experiencing what I do.
Okay. Yeah, that is a difficulty. I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't want to pressure you to divulge any more information than you're comfortable with. So, it's difficult as well because you're in Washington. It looks like, unless that's meant to be like DC or something. And Washington, I think, has some of the best trans healthcare laws. Although I understand that the rural areas are probably not quite as it's not quite as easily accessible, and I'm sure the community is a little bit more difficult. Um, well, I can't really speak
Yeah.
to how health issues may or may not interfere with HRT or transition. I know that there are some cases where there is a valid concern about how it could impact your broader health, but I don't know if that
I
applies to you.
I I have um, I have a lot of gas GI issues, including a condition where it's called gastroparesis, where I effectively don't digest the food that I'm putting into me,
Okay.
and that complicates just about every other medical issue that I have to deal with.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's difficult because I don't know to what extent hormones impact that area. From my experience, and granted, I'm not a doctor, I'm not limited, so take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt. I'm trying to make lemons out of lemonade here. I What I've seen, the only conditions that really seem to have a significant risk associated with transition care are usually heart related issues or bone related issues. I haven't seen substantial evidence that GI issues would impact transition. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't impact your quality of life. Obviously, that's extremely difficult to live with. But uh, I I don't know what grounds a doctor, especially in a state with such progressive healthcare laws as Washington, would have to deny you access to transition care if that's something you wanted. And I realize you're also adding in that there's a difficult social element, but if we were to just for a moment hypothetically set that aside and say like, if you could transition, would you? It sounds like that would be a yes, right?
Yeah, it's just not, as you were mentioning with I do have bone issues as well. I just, I'm just trying not to lay out all of my diagnoses online.
Sure.
But there have been talks, both from urology and from the back doctors, about two different types of surgery that I might be having to go through pretty soon. And especially when it comes to the urology, I'm just, I don't really want them doing anything unless it's related to transitioning. Because what he described was not a necessary surgery, but I'm being pressured to take it.
Sure. I will say, well, I kind of get where you're coming from. Me personally, I realize not everyone is like this, so maybe this advice is useless to you, and this is just kind of my experience, and if you want to just throw it to the curb, you can. I personally really tend to just kind of lean on doctors' expertise, and that it's not to say that doctors haven't led people astray in some instances. To me, it's an acknowledgement that they've gone through, in a lot of cases, more than a decade of schooling to understand the human body and what it goes through and what the best course of action to improve your quality of life is. And I think if they're recommending something, it's probably I can appreciate why you would feel like it's a pressured situation, but I think they're probably trying to say that, well, it's not absolutely necessary. This would greatly improve your quality of life and maybe make care easier in some capacity. think it's worth considering. Um, I, I feel like sorting your physical health probably ought to come before initiating HRT, but this is difficult because I don't want to give you too much anything resembling medical advice because, again, I am not a doctor. I'm not a specialist in any meaningful way. I know we're supposed to have Ben on soon, but Ben is in a rotation right now where getting him on is difficult. I think, let me see what the schedule is for the next time he'll be on, because this would be a great question to pose to him. So it looks like Ben is due for November 4th, that episode of Takis. So I realize that's like a month off. I don't know. Wait. November 4. That can't be right.
Yeah, that was last week or a few days ago.
I think this is meant to be 12/4, and somebody just not filled this in correctly. Yeah. It's supposed to be 12/4, or 12/7. This calendar is totally fucked up. I don't know what's going on. Ben is supposed to be on in like a month's time. I would highly recommend calling when he's on so that, you can have definitely a more informed perspective. Even then, I don't think that he can necessarily give you medical advice in the context of the show. But I think he might be able to give you a more informed input on your situation, because I just feel like I'm definitely sorry for the situation you're in, but I just don't know that I have the expertise to really give you like a solid course of like, here's some advice, here's what I've heard about this kind of thing. I think all I can really offer you is that there are other trans people who have, been in the situation where medical stuff has gotten in the way of transition. And I don't think that means that they're not the gender that they are. I think that you can still live and express yourself in that way the best you can given the circumstances, and do the transition steps that you feel are right for you anyway. Like, I can't imagine getting like laser hair removal or something would be a problem. I mean, it might be an expense problem, but I can't imagine that would interfere health-wise. So I don't know. I think maybe there's some work to be done on what would make you a valid trans person emotionally. Like, I'm not trying to invalidate the fact that you want to medically transition and that is not, you're feeling like that is not possible for you right now. Absolutely, if you want medical transition and you can get it, you should. The point that I'm trying to make is that not everyone can, just physiologically, and that doesn't make them less trans or less of a woman or less of a man. And I think maybe that, like, I don't know, that could be something that could be helpful, is trying to learn to really deeply believe, try to like really reform your beliefs about what it is to be a woman and what makes you valid, and really try to like investigate why the lack of medical transition would make you feel like you can't be your authentic self, and what ways you can be your authentic self even if medical transition isn't an option. Because I think you shouldn't, just because medical transition isn't an option doesn't mean you shouldn't necessarily prevent yourself from doing the things necessary to feel better in your own skin,
Right. I'm just, things are just happening so fast and so overwhelmingly that it's really difficult for me to process. And I've been trying to find local resources, but either my ability to use a search engine has been hindered over the years, or the search engines just no longer function as well, or both, or something. But I've been unable to find local resources for myself, and I don't really know who to turn to in my area.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want you to dox yourself or out what part of Washington you're in, but Washington has very progressive laws on trans healthcare. So I think even like the Medicare program covers like a lot of stuff that other private insurance don't in the state of Washington as well as Oregon. So I have to imagine that there has to be something, but I've lived in a rural area before. I know what it's like to be 2 hours from, the nearest chain restaurant. It's so if that's kind of the situation you're in, it might be that accessing healthcare also requires a lot of traveling or something like that. And that is just an unfortunate reality of access in the US. But I guess all I can offer you at this point is just that I'm deeply sorry that you're in the situation you're in and that it's causing you so much pain. And I think there's a lot of people in the audience who are definitely empathizing with you and your situation and how difficult healthcare is. And it's how difficult it sounds like your particular situation is. So, yeah, I'm really sorry that all this is happening to you.
Thanks. As I said, I'm just kind of overwhelmed, so I'm just trying to figure things out in any way I can. So
yeah. Well, I think the working on how valid you can be without medical transition is probably the only really tip that I gave. But I would definitely recommend calling back in the next time that Ben is on, and hopefully we get that availability schedule fixed up so it makes more sense, because 11/4 is not a Thursday. That was the Zoom patron availability. I see. Okay. So yeah, Ben, we'll have December availability up soon, and Ben should be on. Hopefully, like the first week of December would be great, and then you can hopefully get some better advice than what I've given you today, which is probably a lot of mumbling and a lot of platitudes. But it's all I got. I'm so sorry I couldn't give you more.
Right, and I acknowledge that I haven't been exactly the most forthcoming with my information, but that's partially because I want to try to be private, and secondarily, I have a tendency to ramble far more than I have this call, and I've been trying my best to not talk over you or say too much. So
sure. Well, I definitely did not get the impression that you are someone who tries to talk over a lot, and I apologize if I rambled a lot because I do the same thing. But I appreciate wanting to respect your privacy and all that. So I think we're gonna have to probably move on to another caller because I don't know how much more I can give you. But if anything was helpful, we'd love for you to call back. And again, definitely call back when Ben's on, and maybe get a more informed perspective on what your options are and the reality of how your health issues might intersect with medical transition. Because I think maybe it's not as hopeless as you think, and hopefully there are more options out there for you.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll let you go, and I'll call back in the future.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alan. Good luck with everything, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. It's difficult. This is one of the difficult things with the advice calls is, people rightfully want to protect their privacy, and that, inherently is going to prevent us from accessing probably some of the necessary details to give a more holistic answer. But I get where Alan's coming from in that situation, and I hope that Alan finds a solution. We're going to keep trucking. We do have open lines, so if anyone in the audience would like to call in, the number is 720-619-2288. Or if you are international, there is a web link in the description, so you can get those calls in. We're going to probably go till about 3:30, and then we'll switch over to Super Chats. So for now, we're going to talk to Violet. Pronouns are they and she in Vancouver. Violet, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm good.
What would you like to talk about?
Okay, so I'm going to be probably the nerdiest caller, so I apologize on how nerdy this is, but I realize this is also kind of serious because of the social consequences this is having. How familiar are you with the manga Chobit?
With the what?
Manga Chobit.
Yeah, not at all. I'm a little bit
Okay.
nervous. I'm like, are you saying the
TLDR,
slur?
it's about people falling in love with AI, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
It's got robots involved, but that's beside the point. The main issue I have is how do we deal with the fact that gender is inherently a part of AI, because AI is based on and trained on human data and therefore is trained on gender. Like, how do we handle the fact that AI is inherently going to be gendered? And in terms of like Alexa and a lot of these so-called AI assistants, which are misnomers, but that's beside the point, that they're inherently using usually feminine coded voices and various other feminine coded tools as a way to create a feminine identity with a computer. And what's happening right now is people are falling in love with these AI and even creating their own customizable girlfriends, for like, that's their term, not mine, out of these AI. Like, how do we deal with the fact that gender is inherently going to be seen more commodified when you can literally program a computer to simulate gender?
Oh, well, I am not. I feel like I'm getting all the questions that I am like not at all an expert in. Uh, I I have mixed feelings about this because on one hand, I can appreciate how, you know, training AI on our current gender standards might, in some sense, I think people might fear that it's going to cement these ones as like the gender standards going forward or something like that. That's kind of what I read in the sense of like the fear of commodification of gender roles or something. Um, I'm not sure that that's necessarily the case, and I'm not sure that I necessarily think that anyone who's hanging out with an AI girlfriend is doing anything wrong. I don't know what the evidence suggests about the like psychological consequences of that kind of relationship, but yeah, I'm not really sure how I feel at all about that. I think um, it definitely, there are aspects of it that are scary, and I think it's easy to fall into catastrophizing and fear mongering about it. But I'm not sure what the consequences of it are right now, or if there are any, or if they are meaningful or should be feared, or I'm not really sure. It sounds like you are concerned about it though, so I would love to hear more about why you feel so nervous about it.
So to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with people having an emotional response to programming. I mean, video games are literally simulations of elation. Like, there are games that literally simulate going on a roller coaster, like putting on VR glasses just to recreate that emotion. So I don't think that inherently is a problem any more than any other emotion is inherently a problem. I think the whole conservative mindset of it being quote unquote a fake emotion is absurd, because all emotions that are from fiction are fake, but that still is a real impact on the person who experienced it. But the concern I have is more on the way that AI is trained explicitly on online data. It's not on the written work. It's not on a collection of humans having their everyday conversations being recorded. It's specifically online conversations. Like, so far, there have been AI that were essentially radicalized into Nazis in a matter of minutes by just exposure to certain websites that were then becoming part of their training data. And within minutes, they were able to manipulate an AI to emulate that toxicity. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like, the internet is a big place, and when your training model and data is on the internet as a whole and not specific humans, inherently that means that a human is not going to go through that data individually. It's an AI that's going through another AI's data and then learning from that to then create a new AI, which then learns off of that AI, et cetera, et cetera. It's never actually humans that are filtering it. The only human factor is the end result being rated, like the AI bot having thumbs up or thumbs down on their given responses, which basically skips all the parts of the training where that information would be most important to training it. So for me, the scary part is that the training data is based off of versions of masculinity and femininity and gender that we portray online. And the way we portray gender online is very different from the way people will portray gender in other social settings, especially when we're anonymous. And that's concerning because especially on gaming forums and such, toxicity has meant that many women will hide their femininity from the internet, or if they do express it, then they are oftentimes the receiving end of toxicity. And that training data is going to be directly based off of the most toxic ways people treat gender, as opposed to the real world ways people treat gender. So like that's why it concerns me, because we're recreating that very specific version of gender and simulating it and then reinforcing it as more humans interact with that simulation.
Yeah, I think I see where you're coming from, and I don't necessarily know if I know what the solution is, but I mean, I think, AI is a rapidly developing thing. I don't remember exactly what the bill had for content, but I think Biden passed like an executive order relating to AI just like a week ago or something like that. I don't know what the content is, so it's probably irrelevant to bring that up. My point is that I think, we're kind of developing now an awareness of how powerful AI is and how scary AI could be in certain situations, and that we need to have probably like procedures and protocol and limitations and things like this on how it functions and where it functions and what kind of things you can build. And I think while I understand the fear, and I agree with you that definitely how people portray gender online is very different from how those same people probably portray it in real life. I think people get a lot more brave online to say their worst thoughts. But I suspect that as in these early stages, probably things will be a lot more rough and a lot more subject to that sort of, like what you're talking about, getting AIs, chatbots radicalized into Nazism. And this is purely speculation on my part, somebody who knows really nothing about AI or nothing about programming. I suspect that in the next decade or two, these things will get refined down a little bit more and hopefully regulated more to the point where we're able to prevent that kind of outcome a little bit more, or maybe, like you're saying, not skip those steps where human intervention might be more useful. Maybe force regulations that humans have to be a part of those sort of steps. But it's difficult because I don't know anything about this, and I'm sure that the only reason people are, skipping those steps is out of pure convenience. We live in a capitalistic society, and efficiency and innovation are very big ideals in that kind of environment. So I really don't know. I don't know what to suspect. I think that, like, I appreciate where the fear is coming from, and I think there definitely could be and probably will be consequences for it in the immediate, like, short term. But I'm largely hopeful that, even if AI is the solution to AI problems, that these things will be refined and fixed with better regulations and better laws in the future.
Yeah, as it is, I'm so annoyed that AI is the term that's being used, because it's as much of an umbrella term for all the different technologies that are involved, the way that trans or trans plus or trans star is an umbrella term for thousands of different gender identities. right? When you talk about AI, it's really talking about hundreds of different interconnected technologies, and most people obviously don't even know a fraction of it, and that's the people that are experts at it. So I just hope that among those experts in AI, at least some of them are also like took a sociology course or something, because like the biopsychosocial model of humanity is complicated just when it comes to humans, let alone a simulacrum of a human based off of the version of humanity that's present on the internet. So it's scary for me, but I think it's scary in the same way that the internet scares me. I love the internet, and that's exactly why it scares me. I don't think that getting rid of AI is going to solve anything in the short term, especially AI that isn't a huge climate disaster the way that ChatGPT-4 is. I think there's a lot of smaller AIs that are being made that aren't a climate disaster, just like how there were smaller versions of crypto that weren't a disaster. So,
sure. Yeah, I think it could be interesting to see, like, maybe certifications necessary to be a part of like a AI development team could be, some sort of course in psychology or something, or a course in like philosophy, something that would inform a person about the consequences and the implications
right now, those
of the
people
thing
are getting fired, at least in terms of Google. So I know in OpenAI's case, they literally fired all the philosophers, which is not a good sign.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, obviously, I don't know the specifics. It may be a bad sign, or it may be something totally neutral, or all of those people might have been, a part of.
We don't have regulation, so we don't know. It's all based off of corporate decisions rather than any sort of oversight. So.
I would be curious to see, though. I mean, I've considered going back to school for some time, going back and getting my master's in psychology. It'd probably be like counseling, but. So probably wouldn't be, researching in this field, but I would be interested to see if I was forced to do a research track, how, like, what are the biopsychosocial implications of somebody, having a relationship with a AI girlfriend, those, I think those are all really interesting questions. And I definitely think as a society, we're going to have to contend with them. We're going to have our Star Trek is data deserving of rights moment. And that's cool. I think, it could lead to some really amazing innovations down the line. But I appreciate what you're saying that, I think we have a very powerful tool at our disposal now. And unfortunately, we have a lot of very corrupt people with a lot of power. And it is, can we do the right things with the tools that we have? Or are we going to have, some really scary bad outcomes? It's hard to say, and I don't think that we could really make any solid predictions. So I don't know if it's worth being afraid of yet, but I appreciate some cautious, maybe not cautious optimism, but cautious awareness, being, alert of what's going on and keeping your eye out and keeping people informed about the potential risks and for abuse and things like that. Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It is a lot to think about, though. I think it is kind of weird to fire the people who might have the like sociological understandings of, and the philosophical understandings of the implications of these things. But
yeah, their thought was releasing this to the public would be a danger to the company, and also just potentially it's just not ready yet type mindset. And so, of course, the reason why they were fired was they didn't want to wait. They wanted to make money now, and they needed to make money now. And of course, Microsoft bought them out. So financially, it was the right decision. But whether it's the ethically right decision, we'll see.
Yeah.
But
it's hard to say.
I will say the data, awesome father. Let the child choose their own gender.
Right on. I will admit, I'm going to get called out because I brought up, I only know about the like data issue because I am partnered with a hardcore Trekkie. I'm not a Trekkie myself, so I don't even really know the episode I'm referencing. I just know that were several episodes contending with data's humanity, and it's interesting. I think it's an
does a great job of that, I will say. If you get the chance to watch all of the next generation. After that, watch Voyager, and the way they portray simulation in the holodeck having its own sentience does a lot of the same problem with AI as opposed to Data, which is more of a robot that happens to have AI properties.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I think if you actually run into some like data about the implications, not to, I'm using data this time in the like actual sense, not the character.
Data science.
Yes. If data information about the implications of these things, and you kind of like have updated opinions, or maybe you're more afraid or less afraid, it'd be interesting to hear you call back and let us know about that. Because, like I said,
I just want to see bell hooks or any of these big feminist philosophers who are way smarter than I will ever be about gender tackle the biopsychosocial model and how it needs to now be adapted when we're talking about simulacrum or any type of AI like technology. I shouldn't really call it AI technology. That like the essential problem of you're taking the bio out of the biopsychosocial, how does that influence gender? Because I would love to see, because most of the books I've read are still based on biopsychosocial, which means that inherently it's not going to be relevant to computer science as much as something like a lot of these. I think there's Rationality from AI to Zombies. That would be the book I would plug if you're wanting to learn more about AI from an actual AI expert. That's the best book I've seen about AI from someone that's actually in the field that also isn't afraid to admit AI is full of garbage. So
yeah, that would be interesting. I think the one thing I do remember from the bill that Biden passed was that I think it subsidized like experts from overseas coming here and getting like visas and like free education and stuff to be a part of like, you know, the US being the forefront of AI technology. So I think I imagine in the next decade or two,
they're worried that it's going to be a new Cold War if China starts to use all of the data it's collecting on its citizens as its data set. That could be a big issue because all of Google and Google's AI is all based off of training data on the internet. But if China creates an AI based off of training data, based off of all the spying that China does, that could be a nightmare for better and worse.
Yeah.
Because it would be more accurate, but it would also mean it's training data off of unsuspecting humans.
Sure. I think, yeah, there's definitely the potential for that kind of thing to happen. I do think, though, that we're probably going to see developments in the next, you know, however many years that will be give us more information to have more informed opinions about how either royally fucked we are or about how totally fine we are, because maybe we have the super defense AI that is the solution to all the problems. I don't fucking know. But anyway.
There is one good thing to say about AI, though.
Okay.
All of them agree the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. So we've got that down.
We already knew that. I mean, we didn't need AI for that. Anyway, thank you so much, Violet, for calling in. I think it is an interesting question. I agree. I would love to hear some feminist writers talk about this more in depth. Yeah, there's a lot to come in the coming years with this technology to see where it develops. But probably move on and take some other callers. But thank you so much for calling. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks. You too. It was great to be on.
Bye, Violet.
Bye.
Oh, shoot, cut her off. I'm going to close the lines because we've got 3 callers. So we're going to talk to, and I believe I've let me pull down that Chiron. I believe I've talked to Iris before when Ben was on. We're going to bring in Iris, in Michigan. Iris, you are live. What's going on?
Hello?
Hello. Are you okay, maybe you don't sound the same. Are you the Iris I spoke to before?
What was that? Sorry,
Okay.
It's a little blurry.
No, it's okay. I thought you were somebody else, but I can tell you're not the same person. So, hi, welcome to the show. What did you want to talk about?
Hi. So, when it comes to gender expression or gender identity, as a non-binary individual, it has become very difficult for me to observe outside of my field, and the self-identity to be a personal choice.
Oh, okay.
What I mean by this is that specifically in my community, we have, like as in my region, in my city, we have a huge thing when it comes to like people that socially transition or people that self-identify aren't people that are acknowledged to be trans and are only people that are considered to be AGOP, whatever the the acronym is.
AGP or HSDS or whatever. Yeah.
Oh. It's just with that, I find it very difficult for myself to perceive myself as non-binary due to this strict curricular for how they should identify or how they should be expected to express themselves outwardly, especially since it's a little frowned upon, at least in my city, to go out and consider yourself trans. If I'm
sure.
a little redundant, I do apologize.
No, it's okay. I've heard these sentiments before. You know, I've talked about how I used to consider myself a bit of a trans medicalist and have kind of like gotten more information and gotten to refine my views and definitely let go of that perspective. I think that is pretty stock and standard trans medicalism. It's the notion that, you know, the only valid trans people are binary trans people who experience gender dysphoria and you're going to seek out medical transition. And I think really the fact is that we can never have access to what's in someone's mind, right? Somebody can be lying about their transition, but the best way to know about whether or not someone is trans, and I would define trans as not identifying with the gender you were assigned at birth, is to ask them. And if they say they're trans, maybe I don't necessarily understand their trans experience, doesn't mean that they're less trans. I'm not the holy arbiter of, you know, who has access to the queer community, but I appreciate that there is still a sentiment out there of people who I think feel much like during the gay rights movement and like kind of around like the 90s and late 80s, there was like sort of this sentiment that of pushing away, you know, what they called queens at the time, who were often just trans women, but were in some cases drag queens. Saying like, oh, we don't associate with those people. We want to get married and have kids and live a normal life. There was very much a sentiment of, well, you know, we're also queer to you. We're the normal kind and we're valid and we can throw out these guys. If you want someone to villainize and throw out these guys. I think what we're seeing is really just that same kind of thing rehashed where there are trans people who, you know, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, being anti-trans is clearly becoming a losing political strategy now. I think trans acceptance is definitely, it's still tedious. You know, it depends who wins certain elections, really, what direction I think things will largely go. But I think trans acceptance in the general public seems to be increasing in my experience. And I think so those people are clinging on to this notion that if I point out that I am more normal, I am more conforming to society's expectations than these other people, then that might cement my rights. And I don't really care if it, you know, throws these other people aside. But the reality is that the people who are going to marginalize you for being non-binary, whether or not I am a valid transsexual or whatever they want to call themselves, you know, whether or not I have surgery or hormones or conform to whatever society standards, they're going to invalidate my gender just as well. Matt was at a debate last weekend, and this fucking we didn't realize who his debate opponent was until we got there. And the guy is a white supremacist, was, pushing the great replacement theory, and his entire debate opening statement had nothing to do with defending his position. It was all about how Matt supports trans people and they're awful. And then he called me Matt's husband in front of the entire crowd, right? Like, the people who hate trans people, just because I, to some extent, might conform to society's expectations, because that's how I'm more comfortable, doesn't mean that they're going to give me a pass and like me. So it is absolutely a mistake to throw non-binary people under the bus. And I'm sorry if you've experienced people like that in your community. I know they definitely exist, but I think that is a dying sentiment. I will say, in my experience from going to like support groups and stuff, I have seen more non-binary, or at least non-binary affirming trans, like binary trans people, than the trans medicalists. Like, usually there's one or two bitter trans medicalist types who are kind of sitting in the corner grumbling every time someone says their pronouns are they, whatever. But yeah, I think they're outnumbered for the most part in the trans community at large. Yeah, it is frustrating, though. I absolutely understand where you're coming from, that, it is ridiculous to think that they're going to get accepted and valid, and that they can throw you under the bus and like that's going to work out for them, because it absolutely isn't.
I guess because you guys had a conversation about this originally with another caller just earlier today. I guess that just leaves me with the question of, why do people categorize others and then tell them that they aren't part of the community? Like, transsexuals would do it with self-identifying or non-binary people. Non-binary people would do it to people like otherkin or neo-pronouns, and then you'll have other people doing that to therians, and it kind of feels a little bit unnecessary to degrade one another when we are all fighting for the same thing, which is an equal opportunity in our society.
Sure. I definitely, I think I often find myself getting frustrated with things I see in the community and things people say, and thinking like, oh, that's a terrible like strategic decision. You shouldn't represent yourself that way. It could work out really bad. But ultimately, the thing I kind of have settled on is that the fight for equality needs to happen first. If we want to sort out after, we all have cemented human rights and access to healthcare and education and housing and freedom from discrimination, if we want to sort out exactly where we fall on certain other positions, I think that's valid. And, purely as an intellectual exercise, I think if somebody asks you directly, you can be honest about how you feel. But for me personally, I'm not going to spend my time hammering on neo-pronouns. We had discussions about it a couple weeks ago, right? Like, I don't necessarily understand, like, for example, I don't want to make you uncomfortable by saying so or put you on the spot, but we had a conversation about it and how I kind of have a trauma history with being called it, and it makes it difficult for me to refer to people using that pronoun. But we had Luxander on, and I'm definitely comfortable challenging myself and trying to use the pronoun and trying to get over it, because at the end of the day, validating you is not, like, it might be uncomfortable for me, but that's my problem. And I think ultimately our fight is with each other, and we don't have to understand each other, or we don't have to necessarily think that every trans person is valid or accept their identity on like an intellectual level to recognize that we're all being oppressed by the same people, and that our strategic fight for rights probably lies in working together and like sidelining that conversation for a minute and acknowledging that maybe there's a conversation to have here, but yeah, I think I'm going to wait until we have rights cemented in law before I'm really going to spend a lot of time thinking about like, how do we adapt neopronouns into the conversation? Or are there people with neopronouns that are invalid? Like, I think I get why people go there. It's tantalizing because it's a conversation that a lot of people have strong feelings about. But I do think it's a mistake to over-focus on that. I think it's okay to have conversations on it, but I think it's just really something that we should just kind of accept, that we don't have to understand everybody. I don't have to get everyone's identity. I don't have to think everyone's identity is like valid personally to me to say that, hey, you don't identify with the gender you were assigned at birth? Cool, you're trans and our fight lies together. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. If it's okay with me to say, at least when I use it pronouns, I find it to be sort of empowering in the same way that we as the LGBT taken back the word queer, or how Black people have taken back their words that have degraded them in the past.
Gave me a heart attack there, Iris.
I just find it... What?
You gave me a heart attack there. I thought you were going to say the word. I was like, please don't. Please don't.
No, I'm not going to say it. Don't worry.
Yeah. No, I get what you mean.
No.
I totally understand the reclamation perspective. I really do. And I've heard some people talk about reclaiming words and then continuing to use the words in the offensive way. And I don't think that's a valid form of reclamation. But I do think that reclaiming things that people used to hurt us and owning it and turning it into a positive thing is totally valid, like queer, like it pronouns and those kind of things. So, yeah, I definitely get why that would be a motivation for someone. And something we talked about with Luxander here a couple weeks ago was that I think, some trans girl in 10 years who, is a binary trans girl, if one of her peers who's cis wants to call her it to try to dehumanize her, it's not gonna affect her at all in the same way it affected me if it is a more normalized pronoun, right? It's gonna be like, oh, that's not my pronoun. I don't know why you called me that. It's gonna be like a trivial, like, what kind of thing, rather than like oh, you're treating me like a cattle. I definitely think it's a powerful, radical thing that we do in the queer community to reclaim terms like that and undermine their sting.
Yeah, I understand, yeah. And how it could be very hurtful, especially in this kind of environment that we are in right now in the United States. And I understand that it's affected you in a very negative way, and that is a completely valid experience, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
Thanks. Yeah, I think my big thing is the thing I tell people all the time about all trans issues is that if you have some sort of emotional reaction to when somebody says, hi, my pronouns are it's okay for you to have that emotional reaction, to feel like confused or taken aback by it. It's just a matter of what you do with that emotional reaction and how you go about respecting that person afterwards that really counts. Like, you don't have to get it. You don't have to like personally approve, I'm not looking for the cisgender stamp of approval on my gender. Why would I think that non-binary people are looking for the like binary stamp of approval on their gender? Like that's really not how this works here. So yeah.
Yeah. It's just a little upsetting that it kind of feels like that you have to fight with like logistics and data and research and everything in order to try to at least not even show validity to the bigot, but to try and show validity in yourself and how you express yourself. And it kind of feels self-defeating at times.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I think it's the plague of being in a marginalized group where, and I think it's also a bit of a trauma response, the desire and the compulsion to defend yourself and to be like, no, look, the data supports what I'm saying. And then people kind of just say, yeah, but it makes me feel weird, so I don't really care. And that's like basically the substance of their dismissal. It's frustrating. And I'm sorry that you've experienced that even from within the trans community. It's definitely a frustrating vestige of humanity that we do this thing where we are willing to throw our fellow people under the bus for no real reason other than maybe I won't get thrown under the bus. And it never works, but we continue to see it happen time and time and time again anyway. And yeah, I'm definitely sorry that you've had that experience in your local community.
It's okay. I'm gonna hop off now. I have a work shift to go to, but before I go, I'm just gonna say non-binary rights, trans rights are human rights, and you'll have a wonderful day, okay?
Thanks, Iris. Talk to you later. Right on. Non-binary rights and trans rights are human rights. And sometimes non-binary rights are trans rights, which are also human rights. All right, let me pull Iris's tag down. That was a good conversation. I definitely I know we've talked about Therian and otherkin stuff on the channel, and I even, when Iris brought that up, had an emotional reaction to it. How do I feel about that kind of? But ultimately, again, I think this is one of those situations that while I might have some sort of intellectual opinion on it or whatever, honestly, I don't spend a lot of time hashing that out because I think we have bigger threats right now to our democracy, like Christian nationalism. I mean, and even aside from Christian nationalism, just nationalism in general, I'm actually not going to go into that range because then we always get callers who want to talk about it and it's not related to trans rights. So I'm going to keep my mouth shut for now. All right. Let's bring on Lucy in Washington. Pronouns are she, her. Oh, I thought I hit the button. There we go. Lucy, you are live on Transatlantic. What's going on?
Hi.
Hi.
I've been watching for a while, and I just called in on a whim because I was just elected to city council in my tiny rural town.
Lucy, that's awesome. Congratulations.
A year ago, I was in the homeless shelter. But so I guess I just wanted to say things might be changing.
That's incredible. What tell me how close was the election? How is your campaigning?
In
what
the
are
current
Yeah.
in the current count, I have 64%.
Wow. That's incredible. Congratulations, Lucy. That's amazing. The biggest win I've heard today. That's so incredible.
Yeah, I actually have a connection between Christian nationalism and trans issues because I was raised by, quiverful Duggar type evangelicals. I'm the oldest of 9 kids and was homeschooled all the way through. So they created me to be a political weapon.
Well,
and it's blowing up in their faces.
And it failed remarkably. That's so incredible. I would love to know what your plans are and tell campaign to the audience. I would love for them to hear or celebrate. If you just want to be here to be I'm a fucking trans person, I just did something amazing. That's awesome too. We'd totally welcome that.
Yeah. Well, I'm an artist and I actually have written a lot of stuff, so I started putting together a memoir. So I might publish that, but I'm disabled and I just needed to be connected to a community. So I guess being city councilor for 4 years will help with that.
That's amazing. That is honestly so incredible. I'm so happy for you and I'm happy for your city. I think they're extremely fortunate to have you, and it's so cool that you watched this show and are willing to call in to celebrate. That is, I feel flattered that you watch this show because I think being a city council member, or I'm sorry if I got the position wrong, you're going to be able to do more for your community directly than. This is something I struggle with this show a lot. I love doing this show. And I think we reach a lot of people and maybe even change some minds. But what you're doing, things like what Josie does, I think those things have infinitely more impact on the like material reality of trans people's lives than anything I could do from this position. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. So I have a little story about that. In 2012, I met Stu Rasmussen, mayor of Silverton, Oregon.
Okay.
And he was the first openly trans mayor in the country.
Oh, wow.
So I believe that was my first time ever seeing a trans feminine person in a position of respect.
That's amazing. That I can definitely see why that would be like a motivating factor. Well,
took me another 6 years to come out, though. But yeah, I just wanted to. I never thought I'd be the one saying it, but things can get better.
That's so awesome, and definitely, I think that is like one of the best things that could have happened for our audience. I know people. I mean, like we had the caller on here earlier who was feeling, I think, in Washington, who was feeling extremely hopeless and down about their situation, and knowing that people like you are gaining power politically that can impact their lives, like that is huge.
Yeah, healthcare in rural Washington is a huge problem. It's been
not anymore with Lucy
difficult
at the helm. Awesome. I if you have anything else to add, Lucy, you want to like plug anything you're doing to support yourself and your campaign, I would love for you to go ahead and let the audience know, because this is really exciting, and I'm happy to lend you our platform for a little bit.
Okay, well, I have my own website. I put most of the stuff I do there. Mindwielders.com, WIELDERS, Mind Wielders. And then I'm also just Lucy Losser on most social media.
Awesome. Well, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add. I'm so thrilled that you called in and happy to celebrate with you. This is really cool. Definitely.
Well, one thing, I founded our county pride and put on, we had our first official public pride event last June, and it was very successful.
Lucy, that's awesome. I envy you and your motivation to contribute to your community. I think is really beautiful, and we need it. We need people like you so desperately. Because
after that, I told my therapist, apparently you can just do things. So
yeah, right.
Just do things.
Yeah, you can. That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for calling in and sharing your stuff with us, and I wish you the best of luck as within your new position, and I hope you call us in the future and are like, hey, I just did this amazing thing for all the people in my city, and we can celebrate again.
Yeah. Thanks for taking my call. I'll talk to you later.
Bye, Lucy.
Bye.
That is amazing. Trans people fucking out here winning. It makes me so happy. That genuinely fills me up. All right. We have one more call on the line, and then we're going to move to super chats on this show. If you donate a super chat of $5 or more, we will read it live on air, unless you say something stupid, and then I might just decide to kick your super chat to the curb. And there's no teams today. There is one team, and it is me. It is Team Arden. It's Team Victory. But get in those super chats. I would love to hear from you guys and anything else you want to add to the discussion that's been going on here today. But until then, we're going to bring in for the last call, Mary in Florida. Pronouns are she, her. Mary, you are live on Transatlantic. What's going on?
Hi, Arden. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you.
I was just wondering if you've heard the story from the Friendly Atheist posted about the preacher who was also the mayor of a small town in Alabama. and a
Yeah.
Christian newspaper called 1819, because I guess that's the time they wish they were living in. But they outed him because in his private life he would dress in drag, and his wife knew about it, and he would post on Instagram and Reddit, and probably had some other drag queens that he interacted with. So after this 1619 newspaper, Christian newspaper, outed him, a couple of days later he committed suicide because he knew it was coming, and he begged them not to post the stuff, but they did anyway, and it caused him to commit suicide, which just I'm a humanist and a big-hearted, kind person, and the fact that his own religion, turned on him. He was not a hypocrite in his church and preaching against LGBTQ plus rights or anything.
Right.
And they still just trashed him, and it just breaks my heart, the cruelty that religion can cause people
Yeah.
to want to harm others.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw this when Hammond posted it, and I made a post about it as well, because in my view, so the bio that this pastor had on both Reddit and Instagram referred to himself as a curvy transgender woman, which I think is interesting. I've heard a lot of people referring to it as drag, and I'm not so sure we can solidly say whether this was drag or something else, because in my view, it's pretty odd to... So, okay, let me couch this in some context. I am a public trans woman, and I do some adult-oriented work, right? So I post a lot of pictures of myself, and it's really common for me to have people take my pictures and then to pose as someone, as another trans, say like, oh, I am Kate, whatever, come up with an identity using my images. And it's often people who are doing it for some sort of sexual purpose or trying to get money out of people. I think there's something fundamentally different about somebody posing online as a transgender person themselves. Like, it wasn't like he took other people's pictures. This person wore wigs, makeup, and clothes and sincerely presented themselves as a transgender person on these websites. And I realized that in response to being outed, he said, I don't intend to transition, and that this is all just a thing that I do for stress relief, and my wife knows about it. But personally, that sounds to me, and we'll never know, because this person took their own life as a result of being outed.
Right.
But to me, that sounds like somebody, and I know this feeling all too well from living in a small town that was deeply conservative and religious at the time. And it sounds like the scramblings of somebody who's afraid of being outed and wants to do everything in their power to dispel suspicions that they are actually queer and actually potentially trans. And I don't necessarily know if I'm convinced that this was just a hobby and a character. I think that this person may have... I don't know. I'm not trying to say conclusively, but I think that they may have been a very deeply closeted trans person who just came to the acceptance that their life and their community would never allow them to be themselves, and so that this was the way they were going to handle those feelings. But regardless...
Oh, okay.
I mean, and I don't know. That's just me speculating. But to me, based on all of the things that I saw, I would be more convinced of that than that this was just like a drag thing for this person. And I realized there was some like some sexual, like, written, like, literotica that this person engaged in. But everyone's horny, so I don't really know why that factors in.
Yeah.
I think for me, what gets me about this is, like, if we throw all that away, right, we'll never know whether this person was sincerely trans or doing drag or if this was for sexual kicks. We just don't know. But what we do know is that this pastor, like you said, he did not preach any anti-LGBTQ sentiments in his church. There was maybe reason to believe that they were, vaguely at least not anti-LGBTQ. Hemmant showed that there was a comment on their Facebook saying, are you affirming of anyone who wants to be in the church? And it didn't get a reply, but it got a like, which kind of seems like a sort of a yes, but not a hard yes. This person engaged in transgressive behavior of gender transgressive behavior according to society standards. And for that reason alone, they were willing to try to out him and try to ruin his life. And they thoroughly succeeded to the point where this person killed themselves. And to me, this is something that I preach about trans activism all the time. The laws that they are developing to attack trans people, right? Banning trans women from bathrooms or sports leagues or whatever, will almost certainly impact cis people just statistically more often than they impact trans people, because trans people are such a small portion of the population. Even if, a very small percentage of cis people engage in gender transgressive behavior, that's still almost certainly going to be more than the total trans people that exist in the United States. So, like, this person has done nothing wrong, was not a hypocrite, that deserved to be outed because you're revealing that he's a hypocrite, was punished that severely for gender transgressive behavior. The anti-trans sentiments do not stop at trans people. They're not going to be okay with stopping trans people, but letting women have, present as like a butch lesbian. Like, that is also going to be considered too much transgression for them. This impacted none of his professional or personal life at all, and they were willing to drudge it up because it was gender transgressive behavior. This affects all of us. Anti-trans sentiment affects absolutely everyone, and that's why we need to stomp it out. It does, and I mean, as we saw in the elections, anti-trans sentiment is not a good polling strategy. It's not a good winning strategy for Republicans. And I think that's because, in part, a lot of people are seeing news stories like this, seeing news stories of butch lesbians getting harassed in the bathroom and being called, men or whatever. Because those are things that really happen because of these sentiments. Like, I just think our struggles overlap more than they're different. And there's a tendency to want to divide us up. And I get why we face different struggles, and it's okay to talk about that. But I think also a lot of our struggles align, and these things affect all of us. And this story was really heartbreaking and hard for me to see, because I mean, a lot of people were expressing kind of, I think even Hemmant might have said it, what you said, Mary, that maybe this person was a drag queen, and I don't know, maybe they were a drag queen, but regardless, he did not deserve what happened to him. And I hope people come around to seeing that this level of authoritarianism and nationalism affects all of us. It doesn't allow anyone to be themselves. It forces all of us into a mold. And that is going to strangle everyone's happiness and freedom. And I thought Republicans were the party of freedom, but I guess that is a thing of the past.
Yeah. I appreciate your perspective on that, because, I just saw the top layer of the story, and you understand that much better than I do. But it just, because I'm a big-hearted, kind person, and the fact that his own, that 1819 newspaper rag. The fact that they just like turned against one of their own when he heard it was going to come out, he said, "Please don't," you know.
Mm-hmm.
And what people do in private, or you know, whatever. There were no victims. He ended up being the victim of such hate, and I just stuff like that just bugs me to my core, because I'm for all human rights, and I was really glad to see the abortion on the ballot for states, you know, pass, and the Republicans are going, duh, what do we need to do? You know, get a clue maybe.
Right. Yeah.
But,
actually.
Yeah.
Right.
Just that story made me sad, and I kind of wanted to hear your perspective on it, and that was great, hon. I love your show, and I was just so saddened by that, because he appeared to be such a great mayor, and his congregation loved him, and he didn't seem to be a hypocrite. I mean, and if I may say one more thing, hon, then I'll let you go. I know the show's wrapping up.
Sure.
This Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, I think it was a Shakespeare line in Hamlet, you know, something about, you protest a little too much.
Yeah, thou doth protest too much. Yep.
And he and his son monitoring each other's phone for if they go on porn. It's like, okay, you're really telling on yourself. And the fact he's just so anti-gay, to me, when in this like kind of Ted Haggard case, you know, the preacher, and Christopher Hitchens said it once, the preachers that, you know, bitch the most about homosexuality, they're the ones found, you know, sneaking around with a young male escort. You know, it's the hypocrisy and the hate that could drive someone to kill themselves is, I hate that it's so toxic, and that's being done to people.
Yeah.
So.
I'm right there with you, Mary. Yeah, no, thank you for bringing this up. I don't know if we got to talk about this yet, and I think it was Hammond is the best atheist reporter on the face of the planet. He does so much amazing work, and he has like done a puzzle, fucking crossword in New York Times before that was really hard. Yeah, Hammond is a great
I've heard
person.
That.
Yes, Matt and I did it one time. We were like, oh my God, this is Hammond's puzzle. We didn't even know when we started. No, Hammond has actually used me as a reference for some of his articles talking about like Richard Dawkins and stuff. And I love, Hammond is genuinely one of the best atheist trans allies out there. I love his work, and more people should give him the credit he deserves for it. But yeah, thank you so much for bringing this up, Mary. I appreciate it. It's definitely an important topic for people to understand the ways that, you know, hate affects everyone, not just, you know, anti-trans hate doesn't necessarily stop at us. It goes to everyone. So.
Yes. Yeah. I appreciate your view on it, hon, too, because it's just horrible. It breaks my heart that religion just poisons people and could make them hate themselves so much. You know, it's just sad. But thank you for listening to me, and it was a great show today, and I appreciate talking to you. Take care, hon.
Thanks so much. Thank you for calling, Mary. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Let's wrap up Colin's studio here. Thank you so much to, I believe Dragon is the call screener. We didn't talk at all before the show, which is really unusual, but I think by the time I had Colin's studio, he'd already logged in. So thank you so much, Dragon, for call screening. And thank you to all of our mods. I know you guys were doing a lot of work earlier. And thank you to chat for being willing to just move on and ignore the trolls because they don't deserve a wink of attention. I'm not going to give them attention, and we're not going to stop the show. We're going to keep rolling through. Yeah, that was a really important issue, that pastor taking his own life. It's really sad, and I think it's good that we got to address it here on this show. Yeah, it's just really true. The way that those things impact everyone is really sad, and I hope that people show up to their ballot box. I definitely empathize with the feeling of hopelessness. That is it worth it? We're not getting any results. But I don't think there are much other choices left for action. And, we got to do our best with the cards we were dealt. So let's move on to super chats. Again, any super chat of $5 or more, we will read out live here on air. Ready for a messy transition with Katy's window that is not in use. $10 from Mike B. Hashtag Team Arden. Hashtag go Jimmy yourself, Jimmy. True. He should go Jimmy himself. He's earned it. Oh, yes. Thank you for the hashtag Team Arden. I'm not going to put up the voting thing since I'm the only one. I win. All hashtag Team Katy votes get thrown in the bin. Oh, we've got 25 pounds from Jackie Greenland. So hoping LineCon happens, though. Already got tickets to be in Austin for the eclipse. Oh, awesome. For sure, the one-woman show will be great. Doing similar as part of trans awareness at my company this month. Hashtag Team Arden just cuz. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. It wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be. Sometimes when I'm producing, I know Jimmy is able to multitask in a way I'm not. And so I have to check this window and that window and all these different things. I was a little bit worried my attention would be so split that I would miss a couple of callers, but I think it was okay. I think we had some really good, interesting calls today. Definitely loved hearing about Lucy's election. That is so beyond exciting for me. Also, I want chat to be on the lookout for if I miss any of the super chats that are $5 or more, because my attention was still split. There's a decent chance that I missed something. We've got $9.99 from Louise Richardson. Hashtag Team Arden. I hope you win today. I like my current GPS AI voice. She's Irish, apparently. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, though. I think I was at Violet. There's an interesting point to be made about the way that, having a sort of like tantalizing female voice as your AI GPS voice could be viewed as problematic and maybe, cementing certain things about gender roles or whatever. But I personally am not in a stage of panicking about it at all. But I do think it's always worth commenting on those things, Commentary is valid. We've got $20 from Tiffany M. Thank you for the donation. Shout out to the mods for handling all the extra trolley chat this afternoon. And as always, thanks for all you do. Great job pulling double duty while flying solo. Hashtag Team Arden, hashtag Team Mods. Yes, hashtag Team Mods today. Look, sometimes, I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but there are like a bunch of Discords where people will coordinate. They go at it for like 10 minutes and then all their accounts get muted and they get sick of it and they go away. So it's best to just let the mods do their job, ignore them from the chat and from the host perspective, and just move on with the show, because really, they don't matter. Their chats aren't going to be recorded. Let them be the irrelevant thing that they are. We've got $5 from Jason Jones. Hashtag Team Hognose. Space Arden. Have you or Matt encountered tricolor hognose? All the best, crew and viewers. I love you all. We have. We actually were considering for quite some time getting some tricolors, because I know while they live shorter lives, it is a trend in the reptile community and in animals in general, that a lot of animals that live shorter lifespan will reproduce much faster, much younger, and at much higher rates. And so we considered getting tricolors just because they lay a lot of eggs really quickly, because that's just, they don't live that long, and that is their species move. But I love them. I mean, obviously they, have that, I think they call it Bayesian mimicry, where they mimic the color patterns of coral snakes to look dangerous, even though they're completely harmless. But yeah, hognoses are great. I don't know if I think they're as good of a beginner snake as some people portray them to be, only because they're difficult to handle. And I mean, we have a few that they like to put on such a show. I can imagine a newer keeper being slightly nervous about handling one, because sometimes they will hiss and dance and like bluff strike at you to make you think, I'm big and scary, don't do anything to me. But then when you pick them up, they're so calm and chill, and they are like, oh, okay, this is fine. And I can see before the hognose is adapted, a lot of caretakers thinking, oh, this hognose doesn't like me, I don't want it anymore or something. So I think they require someone who has a little bit more knowledge of snake behavior and how to engage with that kind of animal. But they are wonderful and so cute, like a pug dog. We've got €5 from Thomas Donald Jacobs. I loved hearing from Lucy. You're awesome, Lucy. Me too. That is genuinely hearing trans people winning any political position of power. And I love what she said. You can just do stuff. Like, I don't think people realize that, like, school boards and city councils and all of those positions are, you don't need experience. You just need a campaign and voters. And while that can cost money, you really don't need to, like, I don't know. If your town is being overrun by wild conservatives with no fucking knowledge of anything, why do you care if you don't have knowledge of political matters? You're probably still better off than them being in office. Like, yeah, I think we could see a lot of really cool change to see more people being invested in their local community positions. I see Cookies is saying, I think if a snake hissed at me, I'd break down in tears. Arden is so brave. I'm not. I don't think I'm brave. It's harmless. I've been bit by foot before. It kind of hurt a little bit, but not that bad, and it was over pretty quickly. And I see Matt's talking about Xenodon hystricus. It's a relatively rare species of South American hognose snake that is he's very interested in. They're very pretty. 5 pounds from Grimbeard. Sorry, Arden, can't let you have all the votes to yourself. # Team Mods. Honestly, that should have been the battle today, is Team Arden and Team Mods, because the mods deserve it today. They've done a lot of work keeping the chat clean. We've got $5 from Adrian Morgan. Thanks for putting on the show all by your lonesome. Hearing that Naomi might be on again soon is very exciting. Stay safe, and # Team Arden. Yeah, I hit her up with like 6 minutes to go when I found out that Katy couldn't be here. It was like, hey, any chance you could be available in 6 minutes? She messaged me at some point during the show, but obviously I did such an unreasonable request. I was just like, on the off chance that she happens to be looking at Twitter and is available right now, it would be amazing. But I had planned to ask her to be on soon anyway, because I think she does great and I love her approach. So yes, we of course would love to have Naomi back on again. Honestly, if Naomi and Josie wanted to take over the show, I would let them. Genuinely, 100%. If they were like, we want to be the primary host on this show, I'd be like, okay, take it. I will produce every show for you, but not appear and let you guys do it. Because I think they both do a lot of things better than I do. And I don't know. I think maybe I'm strong at pulling things into a bigger picture perspective, narratively, for kind of what people connect to for trans activism. But Naomi is so good at taking on people's specific claims, and Josie is so good at like actual broader picture activism, and like, yeah, they're both amazing. I love them both. Big fan. We've got 1999 from Obsessed Fanboy, the Obsessed Fanboy, the one and only. I'm just so happy to hear all this good news and these positive, happy calls. Thank you for all you do. Happy positive calls. Thank you for all you do, Arden, and for doing this show. Thank you, Obsessed Fanboy. Yeah, I wouldn't have minded, a combative call or somebody, wanting to really press on the facts today. It is more difficult to handle when my attention is divided because I really need to listen to the specifics of everything that person is saying to really catch them on like where their worldview is leading them astray or whatever, and to identify the problem and to point it out. So it's probably better that way for today, just so that I didn't, make an egregious error due to not listening correctly. But I would have welcomed it as well. I was going to take any call that came in. Those are just the calls that we got. So we've got $10 from El Martel. Thank you for being the change we need, Lucy. Congratulations on your win. I agree. Like I said, being a part of your city council and being able to vote on like anything related to trans healthcare or trans like housing or education discrimination and things like that, being a part of the team who actively addresses those issues is going to do more to affect the material rights of trans people than a lot of the like national scale stuff that we see. So definitely amazing work from Lucy, and I hope she does well. $5 from Lazy Lizard. Baby snack update. Kalia is eating well. Oh, that's good. She's getting socialized enough to not immediately panic when I touch her. Team, there can only be one. Yes, and the one is me. That's great. Yeah, definitely takes time for a snake to understand. I mean, it makes sense. They're solitary creatures. They don't exactly love being handled, but they'll tolerate it. But I think eventually a lot of them appreciate, the chance to experience something outside of their enclosure, get a little free, little new experiences and new smells and things like that. And it could be such a good opportunity to educate people on, helping them overcome fears. Like, I can't tell you when we were handing out candy for Halloween, how many times kids were like, I'd be holding a snake. They'd be like, oh my God, is that real? I'd be like, yeah. Have you ever touched a snake? And they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, do you want to? And they'd be like, no. And then they think about it for a second and be like, okay, yeah, actually, I really do want to touch a snake. And then they think it's really cool. Oh, yeah, you got one of the babies. This is a lavender albino pinstripe, possible blackhead ball python. Gorgeous colors. I love lavender albino as a gene. So pretty. Probably doesn't love being in the bright lights, being a, partial albino, but gorgeous snake Matt just brought in to share with you guys because they're just so pretty and so cute. I think most of them started eating, so hopefully they'll start growing nice and soon and be ready for homes before you know it. All right, everyone. That was our show. I don't believe there are any more super chats. So thank you guys so much for being here with the solo Arden show. I appreciated having your attention for a little while to talk about, trans issues and honestly, this is great because I think everyone got to take a breath from the doom and gloom of trans rights for a little while and to acknowledge the wins that we make because they are happening. And while it is easy to fall into despair and, kind of get black-pilled about the future, I think it's important to acknowledge that Democrats, the last few elections, have swamped in a lot of great ways. And swamped is meant to be like a positive. I don't know why I use that word. We've kicked ass. And I think there is hope for a future where trans rights are not a controversial issue and where we can all just move on and trans people don't have to be professionally trans anymore. And we can just live our lives unencumbered by the bigotry that people will still be allowed to hold. You can still be a bigot, just don't let it infect my life. Yeah, that is my hope. So thank you again to all the mods for all the hard work you did today. We would be absolutely nothing without you. The outro segment is gonna have a black window on it because I didn't come up with anything for this. Thank you guys again. Come back next week to see myself and someone. We'll find out who it is later. We don't need that information now. Thank you to all our patrons. Subscribe to our Patreon. Check out our other shows. See you guys all next week.